we talked about a lot of issues. We talked about the economic challenges we're facing, we talked about our environment, we talked about childcare, we talked about our economy, but we also put front and center what has been a previously very divisive issue of reproductive rights and abortion rights. And rather than seeding that as a divisive issue to pull us apart, which is what a lot of politicians want to do right now, we tried to really say, no, we share in common the idea of freedom and reproductive freedom, and the idea that whatever you personally feel, it's not the government's job or a politician's job to tell you how to make those decisions. And I was very encouraged that a lot of people from all political parties agreed with that view. And I find hope and optimism in that, in the recognition that even though I might not make that personal choice, or you may not make that personal choice, every American wants to protect the rights and freedoms of their fellow Americans. And there are a lot of other critical rights under threat right now. Voting rights, the ability for me to drop these guys off at daycare and not worry that the same weapons I carried in combat for 27 months, I was an Army officer before this, could show up at their daycare or a grocery store or a 4th of July parade. And so there's a lot of real existential challenges and threats right now. And so I'm really running for now re-election because of, like, this guy's got to have a better place than what we have right now. He probably wants me to stop talking.
No, he agrees.
He agrees. I can take him, Jen. I got 20 seconds anyway. So, all to say, I look forward to the conversation for as long as I can stay. I'm probably not going to be able to stay the whole time, and I apologize for that. But anything you need, I am excited on these big national issues, but also any constituent needs that you have or people that you know and love, please call our office. We're up and running. We took over for Antonio Delgado and want to keep making sure we deliver all the critical needs and services that you need. So thank you for organizing this, and thank you for having me.
And next, well, we'll do opening statements, and and we'll just do the best we can. Mr. Pat Sheehan is running for Assembly.
How do you do? How much time do you allocate for this?
It'll take about up to 4 minutes.
Oh, Jesus. Okay. Well, let's keep it a little briefer than that. My name is Patrick Sheehan. I am running in Kevin Cahill's seat. Kevin was our 13-term assemblyman here in the 103rd Assembly District. He kept getting reelected because he did the job that we, the voters, sent him to Albany to do.
Put it by your chin, close to you, touch your mouth.
You can't hear me?
No.
Okay. So, I thought Kevin did a great job, and I voted for him all the time. I was a registered Democrat until 2018. And then the Democrat Socialists of America came to Kingston and started targeting the area. He was challenged at the primary. He lost the Working Families Party line that he had had for years, which may or may not be a bad thing, because the Working Families Party at this point advocates that their candidates must agree with defunding the police, which I think is objectionable. So the DSA ran this campaign for Kevin's seat, and my opponent won the primary by a couple of hundred votes. Okay? I had seen the writing on the wall. I'm sort of a news junkie, and I was concerned about Kevin's race early on, and because I'm now a registered conservative. I've always been very conservative. So I registered as a conservative in 18, and I was in a position to take this on. And I decided to carry petitions, and I got the conservative and Republican lines. And I want to go to Albany to represent this district the way Kevin did, basically. He was all about constituent services, and that's what you do. There's 150 assembly members in Albany. You go up there, you divide up the budget, and you bring home money to the district for issues of importance. I also want to strongly advocate for changes to the bail reform law. I went to Albany Law School. I did my thesis in law school on the 1966 Bail Reform Act and current implications, which were current when I graduated in 1999. I worked in the Queens County District Attorney's Office. I've arraigned thousands of people charged with crimes in Queens County, and some we set bail on. A lot of them we set bail on. A lot of them we ROR'd. But I feel that that is a job that prosecutors are best suited to handle, and that they should not have been handcuffed by our state legislature, and I see that as a real problem. I am also deeply concerned about the energy situation we face. We have an energy security issue, and consequently we have a food security issue, okay? The price of food has gone up astronomically. I bought ricotta cheese for dinner. It was $6.09 for a little tub of ricotta cheese. These costs are killing us. But I am very concerned this year, the market price of oil from my dealer is $5.79 a gallon right now. People are going to choose between food and fuel. And that is not something that should be happening in the Empire State. Thank you.
And next we have our candidate for Ulster County Executive, Jen Metzger.
Hi everyone. It's really nice to be here with you all. Again, it's been a while, and I know many familiar faces here from when my dad was living here, and to those of you who are new, since my dad was here, I look forward to meeting you as well. Ulster County is my home. I've raised my children here. I've dedicated my life to public service here, and I am ready to lead our county in this challenging time. We face very real, very significant challenges that can feel daunting. A climate crisis, an affordability crisis, especially housing and utilities, mental health and addiction crises, and a lack of economic opportunity for too many people. I've been working on these issues at local, regional, and state levels. I have a track record, a demonstrated track record of delivering for our communities, first as a local elected official in Rosendale, then as co-founder and executive director of Citizens for Local Power, which fought unfair utility rates and practices, huge issue today that I want to aggressively tackle if I am elected to county executive. And then as a state senator, where we passed transformative legislation to, for instance, codify Roe v. Wade, protect our reproductive rights here in New York State in law. We passed the strongest climate law in the country, which I had the opportunity to work on. We reformed our election system and got early voting in New York, which is a huge deal. And you know, oddly, New York has made it very difficult for people to vote relative to other states, and that was a big step forward. And many of my bills, I had 36 bills that were passed, signed into law with broad bipartisan support because they addressed issues and challenges that we face in our region. Everything from supporting our small and family farms. Agriculture is one of the biggest sectors of our economy here in Ulster County, to providing mental health support for veterans and youth, to expanding access to broadband statewide. As county executive, my top priorities are, first of all, to address the affordability issue, we face a housing crisis. Many people they can't afford where they live, but the really scary thing is a lot of people can't find a place to live. And we need to tackle both the root causes of that to the extent that we can. We don't have control over all of them, and also to expand the supply of housing. We also need to tackle utility bills. Central Hudson its mismanagement practices, don't experience it probably here, but I just met a woman at the door the other day. She got a $7,000 bill. I mean, it's like really, it's really crazy right now. Many of you have known I have worked for decades to protect our environment here and to address the climate crisis we face. A big priority of mine is to take advantage of the opportunities, I'm wrapping up, to shift to a clean energy economy and create thousands of well-paying green jobs, addressing the mental health and addiction crises by expanding services countywide. I know I have to wrap up. And closing gaps in broadband service and cell service. I believe we have all of the building blocks in Ulster County to create a sustainable, resilient, thriving economy that leaves no one behind if we have the right leadership and vision to build on Pat Ryan's great work when he was county executive. Yes, look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to remind everybody that you raise your hand, and if you could keep your question to like a minute. Sometimes questions become statements, and we want to give these people the opportunity to answer.
I just want to know where Susan Serino is.
She hasn't shown, I don't know. Did you get a notice?
She did, she might be late.
Okay, so she may still come. Did you have a question for, okay.
Let's
Yes.
just do Ryan's question, so.
This question is to all three of you. Okay. On election night, the votes are sent to the Board of Elections, counted, the absentee votes are counted, and the commissioners certify the vote. Will you accept the results of that vote?
Yes.
Yeah, cell phone in the back.
Yes. Next victim.
Yes, of course. Yes, and the fact that we have to ask that question in the United States of America is absolutely disgusting. And there can be no tolerance for anyone who sows any doubt about the fundamental beating heart of our democracy, which is free and fair elections. And right now, and I'm sorry, but there are almost 200 Republican candidates running for the United States Congress who refuse to acknowledge the results of the election. I don't care what party you are, I don't care what generation you are, that is unacceptable, and we have to draw a bright red line.
As does the Republican candidate for governor.
Next question.
Oh, could Mr. Sheehan answer that?
He answered, he said
Oh,
yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's all he had to say.
Okay.
An emphatic yes, he gave. Like, what else would I do? Okay.
This is for Mr. Sheehan. What will you do about Central Hudson if you're elected? We here at Woodland Pond have gotten a 90% raise in our gas and electric bill.
I'm going to find out.
And the Public Service Commission is supposed to regulate things.
Okay.
The great state of New York in 2019 passed the Community Leadership, Climate Leadership Community Protection Act, which, as the Commissioner of the Public Service Commission stated at the time, was essentially an unfunded mandate to power providers in the state of New York. The power providers are being forced to meet regulatory requirements from the state to provide 70% renewable energy by 2030. That's 7 years from now. We do not have the technology, we do not have the infrastructure, and we simply cannot meet the demand that the legislature put on these power providers. We are also facing an energy crisis. Whether you like Mr. Trump or not, the state of the United States was energy independent for the first time under his administration. We are no longer in that position. In fact, 15 million barrels of oil were just released from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which is designed to protect the United States and its military in times of trouble, is being used as a political weapon just in time for the midterm elections. So, in Albany, what can I do as an assembly member to attend to this increasing rate schedule? We need to modify the terms and conditions of the climate plan of 2019. We need to work with the power providers to make a more moderate and reasoned approach to how we effectively get to a net zero green power system. Thank you.
I know you asked that of Mr. Sheehan, but everybody's interested in answering this question.
So this is an area of expertise of mine that I've been working on for many years. And the answer that you just gave represents a fundamental misunderstanding of energy markets, and utility regulation. There are two things going on with Central Hudson right now. One is the utility switched its billing system, and it did it in a completely inept way. And so it's really mismanaged people's billings, so they're getting no bills, and then they're getting extremely high bills. And that's like, that, we need to get, as a county, I would like to become a party to the proceedings of this investigation and hold Central Hudson accountable, fine that company, and really the profit, the shareholders should be paying this cost, not residents and businesses. So that's part of the issue, okay? Your bill, your rates, there are two parts to your rates. There is the rate for the distribution system, and then there's the rate for supply. And that supply rate is determined not by Central Hudson, but by the market. And what's driving that huge spike in your supply price is our dependence on fossil fuels. It has gone up dramatically because of the war in Ukraine, primarily because of the war in Ukraine. But fossil fuel prices are inherently volatile. They're always like this. It goes like this. And but that is what is breaking us. And the sooner we transition off of fossil fuels to a clean energy system, which, by the way, the sun, power of the sun, and the power of the wind, and the power of the water is free once you invest in the upfront infrastructure, and those prices are entirely stable. So we need to be, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act actually hasn't been implemented yet, so it's actually had zero impact on rates or prices. The plan is being developed right now for reaching those goals, and it provides huge opportunities not only to address the climate crisis, but to improve public health, stabilize energy costs, and create statewide hundreds of thousands of well-paying jobs. Thank you.
And Mr. Ryan, would you like to chime in? You're good? Okay, all right. Yeah, okay, so, and one of our residents has said, let's ask questions for Mr. Ryan. We have 5, maybe 6 or 8 minutes, so does anyone have a question to the congressman?
I'm sorry, everybody.
No, no,
We'll do a lightning round here,
no, it's fine.
and I apologize to my fellow candidates.
I'm new to New Paltz, okay, so I don't know a lot of your background. I mean, I know what you did, but I don't know what you did. Now, I would never ask you in your experience as a congressman, because you've only been there for 2 months, and I'm not sure if you know your way yet to the men's room, but.
I passed my first bill in 3 weeks, so I certainly know my benefits.
Okay. So my question is, either now or when you were county executive, could you just very briefly explain a piece of bipartisan policy that you worked on, and I emphasize bipartisan, that you're proudest of? And then the others, if you would also respond.
You might need a diaper change right now. Is that part of the deal? Great question, man. Thank you. So I was able to introduce and pass through the House with wide bipartisan support a piece of legislation in 3 weeks that I'm very proud of, expanding VA home loan eligibility for veterans across the country. It'll affect a few 100,000 veterans that currently don't have access to VA home loans, right at the time that we're seeing mortgage rates start to go back up, and at the time that housing need is really, really acute, especially with a lot of veteran homelessness right now. So I'm proud of that. And then as county executive, one of the things that we worked on that was widely bipartisan was our infrastructure work. We used some of the federal rescue plan funds that then Congressman, now Lieutenant Governor Delgado secured for our community, the $34 million to invest in water and sewer across the county, which is in desperate, desperate need. I know infrastructure isn't super exciting, but it's absolutely necessary. It's holding back our economy, it's holding back housing, it's holding back a lot of other things. So we had unanimous support in a lot of the housing action that we took to create a housing action plan and a lot of that other work. So I'm proud of that. And can we do one more quick one, and then I apologize, I'm gonna have to run. Do you want me to just yeah, well, my other son's asleep in the back, so I'm gonna have to go. Anybody else have a?
What committees are you on in Congress?
Mr. Sweto's question was what committees am I on? I'm on the Armed Services Committee, which I'm looking forward to figuring out both how to address the very volatile and dangerous global landscape right now, from Ukraine to China and in between. And also to figure out we have to bring down our defense spending in this country, I believe. It'll be over $800 billion this year. And I think that is out of proportion with the other needs that we have here at home, in our economy, in our healthcare, infrastructure, and a lot of other things. So that's something I'll also be working on there. Ma'am?
I and probably a lot of other people have heard a lot of very negative, which I oppose tremendously, because I've heard what you've written and what I've heard about negative comments about what you have done in your position with regard to the police and so forth.
Yeah,
And I would be very happy to hear how you might respond to these.
The question was, you've probably gotten a lot of negative ads about my record, especially as it relates to law enforcement and supporting the police. Just to give you a little, and you asked me to address that, so I'm happy to do that. To give you a little context, National Republican super PACs, these groups that raise dark money, have spent over $3 million in this district in just the last 6 weeks spreading this. It is a complete outright lie. If my kids weren't here, I'd use another word. It's just absolutely incorrect factually. So as county executive, I consistently increased funding to our sheriff's department, which was under my purview as county executive. I increased funding to our violent crime task force by 20%, leading to the single biggest seizure of illegal guns and fentanyl, this deadly drug, in Ulster County's history. That's one of the many reasons that our own sheriff, who I worked with, Juan Figueroa, endorsed my campaign for Congress. And so all this other stuff is frankly typical fear mongering. It's disgusting. We have run a positive campaign throughout, and I'll continue to do that. And so, yeah, I'm sorry that you're getting inundated with ads, also probably from us as well. But we've tried to keep ours generally positive. We've talked about issues at least, and been certainly honest in characterizing my positions and my opponents. So, thank you for the question.
Will you talk a little bit about the reproductive rights bill that you're promoting now?
Yes. So the second bill that I introduced was called the Protecting Reproductive Freedom Act. It's a piece of legislation that would have national implications to make sure that in every state in the country, women could have access to FDA-approved abortion medication, 2 pills, that have been approved by the FDA since the year 2000, that are used as the most common form of abortion medication, all used in the first 10 weeks of a pregnancy. Yet, despite all that, there are 22 states trying to block access to this medication, or have already blocked access to the medication. So my legislation would protect that access for people, particularly via telehealth, or via mail, so that even someone in another state might be able to access that medication from a state like New York and not have their mail opened and their privacy violated just for receiving FDA-approved medication. So we're really proud of that legislation, and I think that will move through the House when we get back after November, and hopefully, ultimately make its way to the president. So.
Okay, one more question. This gentleman's got to go home.
And I don't want to take everybody's time.
I've got a new system, but
Okay.
one last question. Go ahead.
Do you support financing the Ukrainians' war?
Repeat the question, please.
Yes, ma'am. The question was, do I support financing the Ukrainian war? Yes, is the short answer. With not obvious, but with careful continued monitoring and ensuring that we actually know what our goals are, what our desired outcomes are, and what that criteria would be when we have to make a hard decision. I did vote in my first few weeks to fund additional funding to protect, I think, heroic Ukrainian forces that are defending their country against an autocrat and standing up for democracy. It is a lot of funds that we are allocating to them, but I believe that a problem like Putin only gets worse over time unchecked. We learned this 100 years ago in Europe, and now we're having another rise of dictatorship and authoritarianism, and we need to stand with allies who stand for our values. But just the only other caveat that I have here is that I served in Iraq for 27 months in a war that I had a lot of disagreement with us going and the way we conducted it, frankly, but I did what I was signed up to do when I went to West Point. And I think we need more people in Congress who've seen how atrocious and evil and dark war is, and will say we're not sending our most precious resources overseas without real, careful consideration and public, transparent debate The Congress has the role to make war in the Constitution, and we need to reassert that role. And it hasn't been that way since the 1950s. So I apologize again for all the distraction and drama, but thank you for
All right, I'm gonna take some liberty here, and this format that we have accommodated because of the Davies. Okay, Susan Serino is not coming. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna ask Patrick Sheehan to come up. He can hold the mic, and I can come around with another mic, and he can take your questions as they relate to his running for the New York State Assembly. And Jen has agreed to go third. So we'll do about 10 minutes with this Q&A, and okay, come on over here.
Okay, who's first? Go ahead.
In your opening statement, you made a comment about, in your opening statement, you made a comment about that, I assume it's fuel oil was about almost $7 a gallon. Is that right?
It was this morning, it was $5.79.
$6 a gallon, it close. What do you think the forces are that drives that high price?
That's a very complicated question, and I don't know exactly how it will relate to my service in the New York State Assembly, but I'll give you my best shot. Again, we have a country that went from energy independence to a country that is begging the Saudis and then spitting in our eye, begging the Venezuelans who have a socialist society, begging anybody other than us with oil to ship it here. We have shut down pipeline programs. We have a war in Ukraine that we are funding, and we're also seeing the trouble that that's causing in the European model. So it's a multifaceted problem that I don't know how we can address here in New York State.
Okay, next question. Yes. Okay, I'll get there.
A question that is of great concern to us here at Woodland Pond is a bill that's entitled Medical Assistance in Dying. It came up before the legislature in Albany and never got out of committee. And I'd like to know, would you support such a bill?
In answer to your question, one of the best courses I ever took was at Coleman High School, my junior year. It was called Death and Dying. In my investigative work after I left the Queens County District Attorney's Office, I've worked as a medical examiner investigator in Orange County and in Dutchess County. I have lost my mother to stomach cancer, which was dreadful. I was present when my grandmother suffered a heart attack, and I performed CPR. This is a very complicated issue. I personally feel that there are circumstances where people should be allowed to make their own choices on these types of things, and I would have to see more of the legislative, the bill drafting on that to see what the protocols should be. There are models in other states, there are certainly those in Canada, but in answer, I would certainly consider supporting those types of laws.
Next.
This was a brief comment. I mean, you mentioned that, I mean, the U.S. is begging Venezuela to get oil. The U.S. is begging Venezuela to bring oil. I mean, the U.S. is embargoing the Venezuelan companies.
They've asked, my understanding is that they've asked Venezuela to support us with oil. That's my understanding.
Okay, next question.
You mentioned the price of the ricotta cheese that
Yeah.
we purchased. We are all, even us, are feeling it at the grocery store. However, the small farmer is feeling it too. And what would you do if you are elected to the New York State Legislature to support our small farmers? We have so many of them right here in the Hudson Valley.
Well, you know, everybody talks about supporting farmers, okay? It's like the litmus test for running for office. Everybody wants farmers to be supported. Yet, our state is changing the way that farms regulate the hours for day laborers and rolling that into their costs. You have to remember that farms are run on diesel fuel and on Blue Death. Blue Death is the additive that's a urea product that is also in high demand and limited supply. We need to come up with creative solutions. I am not in a position to find those today on how we help our farmers more than we already have. I would like to see the state of New York, which has some of the richest soil in the country, in the Black Dirt region, where we do the onion farming, to get in front of the potential for fertilizer production in this state. Most of the fertilizer in the world is manufactured in Russia, which isn't sending it here any longer. So our farmers currently, in addition to their fuel costs, in addition to the Blue Death, are facing these astronomical costs for fertilizer. So I don't know that it's a solution, but I would certainly like to see our state study with the Department of Agriculture the potential for us to think outside the box and get ahead of what I think is our reliance on foreign oil is similar to our reliance on foreign fertilizer, okay? It creates a weakness in this country, and I believe we should be developing fertilizer technologies and production here to help our farmers. So that's where I stand on that.
Okay, we'll take one more question for Mr. Sheehan. Anybody?
Only one?
Well, yeah, then you get closing statement,
Oh.
maybe your own closing statement, but, yes.
I'll stick around as long as you want me here.
In the last section of the legislature,
Hey, you got one question already.
a bill failed to pass honoring Sojourner Truth by having a state holiday in November. And she's a heroine for this area. She was born here. She lived here 30 years of her life in slavery. And I think we should have a holiday honoring her as they do in Michigan. So I would hope you would support such legislation.
Okay, I wasn't aware that they were trying to make the state holiday. I think we've got a lot of state holidays. It does come down to, do we need a holiday or do we need to honor this person? I think that our county has done an excellent job of bringing forth the things that Sojourner Truth did. I know Nina Pasterpak just discovered documents from her, the trial here in Ulster County that.
They were in the state archives in Albany.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, they were on display in Ulster County. And my understanding is they were displayed here in Ulster County. So, you know, stay tuned. I feel that she was a pioneer who is certainly deserving of more respect statewide than we give her here just in Ulster County. But anything else before I sit down?
Thank you. No, you'll take notes on your closing statement. Okay. Now, Jen Metzger, who has questions for the candidate for county exec.
Could I actually just say one thing in response to that agriculture question? Because, so I think I mentioned I chaired the agriculture committee when I was in the state senate. And a big focus was on diversifying opportunities for our farms, and that's a big focus of, would be a big focus of mine here in, as county executive. But we can do a lot to really support and sustain our farms if we have more value-added activities that put money in their pockets, more local processing for local foods. That is something that we have a huge opportunity, and we should be using, you know, the former Tech City site, and that's a whole topic I would love to talk about, but in redeveloping sites that are now abandoned, former commercial industrial sites for those activities. And also really capitalizing, we should be promoting our local farmers, a buy local campaign. This is something, I had introduced a bill to require new standards for even using the term local, because it's often used by companies just to get, because people want to support local farms, and so it's often misused. But there's a lot we can do to be promoting and branding our Hudson Valley farms to make sure that we're developing the markets for their goods.
I'll offer one little tidbit. When I was at the New Paltz Middle School, the Dressels had an apple machine. Never saw one before, never saw one since. And they had like 6 different kinds of apples, and I think it was a nickel or a dime, and you put it in, you get a fresh apple. And I was talking to Rod Dressel about that one day, and he said, I used to go there with my father, and well, what a great thing.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I never saw it again. Okay, questions for, okay, I'll come back.
The answers that I got to the Central Hudson question, and to add to the question,
Sure.
is Central Hudson unique in New York State? Or the Con Edison people in New York City, are they paying the same outrageously high cost of electricity? Or Mohawk,
Right, so, again, it depends very much on what I was saying earlier about the supply price, which is driving that increase.
constant all over.
No, it's actually not. Prices are actually, the state is divided into energy zones and electricity zones. And the downstate electricity zones, New York City, Hudson Valley, our area, we are much more dependent on fossil fuels. 77% of our electricity comes from fossil fuel fired generation. And as a result, our prices are much higher now for electricity than they are upstate, which is only dependent on fossil fuels for 8% of their electricity, because they get most of their electricity from hydro and some nuclear. So, so there's, again, if you want your prices to go down, you generate your own electricity from renewable sources. But there's other issues with Central Hudson with the billing that are hugely problematic, and really, we need to really be going after them in Public Service Commission proceedings, and the county should be a party to those proceedings. I was a party to many Central Hudson proceedings. That's the only way you really get anything, is being at the table with the utility, Public Service Commission staff, etc.
You said before that one of the big problems in the county is not just the cost of housing, but the unavailability of housing.
Yes.
Agreed. Given the increase in land values, given the increase in materials, given the increase in permitting requirements, you're sort of squished on the supply end. Where is your wiggle room to provide more housing?
That's a good question, and that the cost, we're still suffering from like these supply bottlenecks from COVID, and building supplies are still costly. There was, the legislature is in the process of creating a county land bank. which I am a big supporter of. They actually appointed me to it, but if I'm elected, I would step down from it. But land banks allow the county acquires a lot of properties through foreclosure. And it can be prioritizing the redevelopment of those properties for affordable housing. You still have the supply cost of the building materials, but it's a way to develop that housing more affordably and also to redevelop properties. And in some cases, it's going to be a matter of simply improving what's there. And then, there are other interesting creative solutions. When I was in the state Senate, I got funding for a project in Orange County for a veterans organization that was creating a tiny home community for veterans facing housing instability. And you can build small homes at a very low price. And what was really wonderful about this project is that it brought all the service, like it was a holistic. The veterans could get the services they need there, including mental health services and other things they needed. There were job opportunities built into the project, hydroponic farming, all kinds of things. But anyway, I'm a little bit off on a tangent, but there is a way to build home. It depends on the need. Obviously, it's not for like a family of 5, but for many people facing housing instability, they're alone, and so there are solutions. And if accessory housing, if more communities adopt accessory housing, it's a way actually for people, if you own a house, and you're on a fixed income and struggling to pay your property taxes, but you can have an apartment over your garage that you can rent to somebody, and make income for yourself to pay for your property taxes and give somebody an affordable place to live. So there are definitely a lot of options. I'm sorry, I can't help myself, but I want to respond to the fertilizer issue earlier. Can I do that really quick?
Well, then no more questions.
Okay, no more questions. Unless you have questions, I don't want to.
It's their question.
Okay, tools.
It's an algorithm.
I was curious about that fertilizer issue too, and I would like you to talk about it.
Well, thank you. So there is a wonderful solution to that issue. So one of the largest sources of methane, climate damaging methane emissions in New York State is from landfills. Methane is 86 times more potent greenhouse gas than carbon. It's incredibly damaging. And it's from the decomposition of organic material. There's no reason we shouldn't be landfilling organic materials. Those materials can be turned into compost and improving soil, which would improve soil health. It's a much lower cost solution than synthetic fertilizers. It's much better for the environment, and it'll create healthy soils, which in turn help sequester even more carbon from the atmosphere and the soils. So it's like a win-win solution. And I would like to see us at the county level, we really need to be diverting all of our organic waste from landfills to reach our emissions goals, and we can do that by creating a countywide composting program I compost, but in my backyard.
All right, so we're pretty much on schedule. We'll go to closing statements. Closing statements can be up to 4 minutes, and then I'm sure our candidates would stick around if anybody wants to have further conversation. So we'll start with you, Mr. Sheehan. You can make yours.
Before we go to my closing statement, I'd like to attend to the synthetic fertilizer question, because it's almost like we're having a debate, Jen and I. Sri Lanka banned synthetic fertilizer about 2 or 3 years ago. It shut their economy down. They produce 2 things, rice and tea leaves.
Rice and what?
Tea leaves.
Tea leaves.
Tea leaves. Tea.
Drinking tea.
The leader of Sri Lanka, I don't know whether he's president or what he is, but he decided that they were going to ban synthetic fertilizer. And the yield per acre was reduced so significantly that for the first time ever, Sri Lanka had to import rice to feed their people. And 70% of the workers who picked the tea leaves and processed the tea for export were out of work because they had only 30% of the crop come in. So that's a real issue, and we have been getting our fertilizer from Russia, and now we're not. So it's a growing issue, and it will grow only more extreme as we continue in this détente we're in with Vladimir Putin. So I just wanted to bring that up before we get to the closing. So the closing statement. Okay. I'm a local guy. I am born and raised here. I went to Coleman High School. I took a year off before I started college and became a volunteer fireman with the Rhinecliff Fire Company over in Rhinecliff. I have over 30 years of fire service. I was a line officer, a president of the company, and I served 5 years as an elected fire commissioner, 5 of the longest years of my life. If anybody's been in fire service or any kind of social organization, you know what I'm talking about. I went to Boston College undergrad. I went to Albany Law School, as I said. I had conversations with a lot of people before you guys got here. Went to Albany Law School. I worked on the Raquel Knox murder here in Kingston before I started law school. She was a 7-year-old girl who was killed by her mother's ex-boyfriend. That kind of set my career path in law. I did my thesis at Albany Law School on the 1966 Bail Reform Act and its current implications when I graduated, for which I got an A+. I then went to the Queens County District Attorney's Office and I arraigned and put a lot of people through arraignments, set bail on those people. The court set bail. That process worked. It was not perfect. I would come home on the weekends to cut the grass at my house and would read the Freeman and see where people who were similarly situated in Queens, same fact pattern, same kind of a defendant, would not face the kind of prosecution down in Queens that they faced up here. So the system was faulty, but it worked to protect our society. The bail system does not work. Kathy Hochul will tell you that it does. I can tell you as a person who has been to many crime scenes, as both a prosecutor and as a medical examiner investigator, we must protect the innocent, and we are failing to do that. And society is feeling the effects of that. So I want to go to Albany to reform bail reform. That is a major issue for me. But the biggest issue for me is dealing with constituent services, okay? Kevin went to Albany, brought the money home to fix our roads, to fix our bridges, to provide for these housing developments, getting water lines in and the unpopular stuff of infrastructure that has to be accomplished if you're going to provide housing for people, or you're going to provide a homeless shelter at the Ramada Inn. So those two issues are critical to me and why I want to go to Albany. I appreciate your time. I'm happy to take questions after we finish this roundtable. And whatever you do, vote. Thank you.
Thank you all for having me back. I can't tell you how nice it is to be back in Woodland Pond and to see all of you. Again, it's really, it has a special place in my heart. Spent many years visiting here. As many of you know, I represented you in the state senate. I represented a 2,400 square mile district encompassing 4 rural counties. It was a great experience. I got a lot done, but I am so excited about the prospect of devoting myself entirely to our county. You know, as I said in the beginning, we have all of the building blocks here to create a sustainable, resilient, thriving economy that leaves no one behind. And we just need the right vision and the leadership to do it. And somebody with the experience, the policy experience, the knowledge of how all of the different levels of government fit together, from the local to the county to the state to the federal. And it's going to be very helpful for our county to have someone in this office who has served in state government, who knows how to leverage the resources of the state and federal government to meet the needs of our communities here in Ulster County. I'm the only candidate in this race that has that broad decision-making experience in both local and state government, that has actually overseen a large government organization, and that has the depth and breadth of policy experience in the range of issues that the county is responsible for, and the issues that are confronting our communities right now. I take a very collaborative approach to governance. I always have. I believe that to have really meaningful, lasting change, you have to work together. You have to work with partners in government, with the legislature, with our sheriff, with our department heads of the many departments in county government, but also with our local governments and with our communities and our state, and making, really elevating the diversity of voices in our communities and making sure that everyone is able to participate. So I'm really looking forward to this opportunity, and I hope you all will support me. I want to just give a pitch for something unrelated to my race, which is a ballot initiative that is on the back of your ballot. It's a State Environmental Bond Act, $4.2 billion act. I actually worked on it when I was in the state senate. I was on the Senate Environmental Conservation Committee. It takes several years before it actually makes it to the ballot, and I'm thrilled that it's there. And Governor Hochul actually added, an additional $1 billion to it, which was fabulous. But it's good. All of that money comes to our communities. It would help us protect water quality. It would help us protect open space. It would help us electrify our school buses, which is not only a climate issue. Our children are breathing in all of that exhaust in the cabins of the buses. It's not good for their health either. And to make the changes we need to make us more resilient to the impacts of climate change, and also reduce our impacts on the climate itself. So I urge you to please support that, and thank you so much for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you to both our candidates for coming and staying. I mean, I don't fault the congressman for, I praise him for coming with the babies. And thank you all. This is coming out for 2 nights in a row. Good showing, good questions, and thank you for having me here, and thank you to Dorothy, who is the key
moderating. I think you've done a fine job.
Thank you so much. Everybody have a great night.